There are a multitude of cool themes and ideas used throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! I won't have time to cover all of them, so I'll go through some prevalent ones. There are many references to the shadows in Yu-Gi-Oh! Whether from the Shadow Realm, Shadow Games, or even the portrayal of the psychological shadow, all of which I will be covering. Shadows are often used to conceal the truth, whether it be mysterious past or the unknown. It is used to bring upon elements of mystery, suspense, and in Yu-Gi-Oh! The shadows infiltrate many aspects of the series. The Shadow Realm was coined through the dub version of the anime to ironically make things less darker. Instead of death, characters were sent to the Shadow Realm, a supposed milder substitute for death. In the Shadow Realms, characters will suffer for all their time there, but their souls can be saved and brought back to the normal world. What started as a euphemism for death could be considered far worse than death itself, as one can argue that death is a more favorable end compared to the unlimited suffering experienced in the Shadow Realm. Next up, we have the Shadow Games, the dark, mystical games the series was founded upon. Shadow Games were chaotic trials that punished the loser in cruel ways, oftentimes bordering life and death. These games were used to bring upon justice, serving as its ultimate proving ground. The name of the Shadow Games were quite ironic, since these games often reveal the true nature of the contestants, rather than hiding them, which is what shadows usually do. In a way, these games cleared the shadows of doubt. They cleared the illusion of what people will portray to be, showing us who they truly were through the highest stake of games. Both the Shadow Realm and Shadow Games had dark aspects to them, hence the term shadow. The use of the shadows was to signify the darkness, the side that often could not be talked about, as it held the less favorable, more harsh aspect of life. In other words, things were about to get dark, shit was about to go down, and someone was probably going to die / get sent somewhere for torture when the shadows were brought in. In order to enact the punishments of the Shadow Games, as well as to thrive in the high-stake duels, Yugi had to resort to his shadow, Yami, to play the games. This leads to the psychological shadow, the last derivative of the dark that I will discuss. The shadow was mentioned in the Egyptian concept of the soul, as hinted at earlier. Although I am no expert in Egyptian mysticism and ancient knowledge, I am more versed in the psychological shadow. So I'll be talking about this concept through the lens of modern psychology. The concept of the shadow must have been around for some time, with different renditions of it all around the world. But in modern times, it was brought into light by Carl Jung, a huge proponent of the concept. In essence, the shadow is the part of our personality that we choose to reject and repress. In other words, the shadow holds certain parts of your personality that you have pushed away from you, aspects that you refuse to associate with yourself, despite it being there. In a sense, the shadow is a part of you that is always there, but you've hidden it away for whatever reason, hence the name shadow. It is the dark, hidden side of your personality, holding everything you did not choose to associate yourself with. Despite that, the shadow is not inherently a bad thing. It is quite the opposite when viewed in the right light. Okay, but why am I bringing this up in a video of Yu-Gi-Oh? That is because Yami Yugi is the very manifestation of the shadow, and it is further represented through the name he sometimes takes, which is Dark Yugi. The shadow usually houses the opposite of what you are. An aggressive and cruel person would have a shadow that is kind and peaceful, and vice versa. We see a picture-perfect version of this through Yugi and Yami. The shadow holds what you lack. It holds the repressed strengths, traits, and once it is brought to light, radical change and progress in regards to one's character can be made. That is the process of integrating the shadow. For Yugi, his shadow held great power. Most people like him. Weak, passive boys who are bullied are the same. Their strong, assertive, and even aggressive side is repressed deep down for reasons such as social conditioning, trauma, and so on. Yami, in a way, represented exactly that. In Yugi's case, someone like him would have never had it in him to punish evildoers, and that is where Yami steps in, his alter ego, which in a way is his shadow self taking over. Yami was the manifestation of all that Yugi could not bring himself to be, through his limitations, personality, morality, and so on. You may think that someone as weak and soft as Yugi, or maybe yourself, may not have any malice to them, any destructive tendencies, but that is wrong. Although Yugi may not show that side to others, it is often shown to himself. As someone with more weaker characteristics, He will beat himself up for things that went wrong, wallowing in self-pity and abuse. And whether you like that or not, that is a dark, harsh side to him. It is something we all do. And the fact that we do that shows us that we all have a darker side to us, to be able to torture a soul so much as we do to our own. Yugi would never verbally disparage someone, but I am sure he would do it to himself. That is just one example of the shadow, and it shows the deep repressed side of him, one that he refuses to show anyone else but himself. Integrating the shadow, making that repressed side of yours an ally, is what can be done to become whole. For Yugi, this was done through Yami, with Yami being his alter ego of sorts. Yami gave him strength when he needed it the most, and that is akin to drawing powers from the shadow self. It brought him balance, whether from being able to assert himself, win duels, or exact justice. While the shadow can hold traits that are considered positive, the opposite can be true as well. If your shadow holds negative traits, then bringing them to light will help you understand more on how to dispel them and live with your supposed demons. I'll give more examples of this concept in future videos on another series I have planned. To add on to the shadow, the concept is accentuated through Yugi and Yami's voice. Most anime main characters have higher pitched sounds that are usually voiced by female voice actors to portray the voice of younger audiences. That is similar with Yugi, but it's not the case with Yami. Yami Yugi has a more stern and deep voice, one more in touch with his masculinity, perhaps signifying the opposite of Yugi. Or it could have been done to accentuate the ancient old age of Yami's character. Another important concept of the shadow is the integration with it, which I have mentioned a few times earlier. This is an important process where you become one with the shadow. To harness its powers, you must confront your shadow many times, or rather duel it in Yu-Gi-Oh's case. This is synonymous with shadow work, which is the process of uncovering the repressed and hidden parts of your personality. We saw this in episode 163, when Yugi faced Yami in a duel for control. In episode 224, Yugi and Yami had a final duel meant to symbolize their merger as one. In a sense, Yugi had finally integrated with his shadow self, and that was symbolized through Yami parting ways with this world. It can be seen further through this quote: "The gift of kindness you've given me, and the courage I've given you, will remain with us, and that will forever bind us together." This quote helps us describe the relationship between Yugi and his shadow, or his alter ego, better. Yugi represented kindness, empathy, and similar characteristics, whereas Yami represented courage, valor, as well as its corresponding qualities. Both sides were incomplete without each other, but when both are bound together, working in harmony, that is when magic happens and they make a complete being. That is the merger with the shadow self. I think this is a beautiful quote that describes Yugi and Yami well. Two opposite sides of the same coin that helped each other where they were lacking. Only by being together and by learning from each other did they synergize to become the king of games. That in itself is what can be gained from your own shadow. The aforementioned quote describes the effect others have on us as well, how they are tied to us through what they have given us and taught us. Even if they are gone, they will forever be alive through you, linked through the memory and impact they had on you if you choose to integrate the effects to your very being. In a sense, you never truly walk alone, as the ones who have impacted you are forever there with you. In addition, I think this quote effectively describes the impact fiction as a whole has on us. Most of us may not have a distinguishable connection with our shadow or our inner strength, and many of us are not lucky to have role models to teach us such things, but fiction itself teaches us things that even the greatest of teachers cannot, and it has for a millennia. It is through the impact that it had on us that fiction becomes real, and through that impact it will forever be tied to us. I am not sure if Takahashi was inspired by Jung's work or by ancient wisdom. It could be that he knew all of this intuitively, or perhaps he got it from the Egyptian components of the soul, or maybe it was something he drew from other cultures. Regardless of where he got it from, he has included many concepts of the shadow masterfully. Takahashi depicts that good and evil, opposites, exist in everyone. The heart of the characters were a back and forth conflict between the two opposing sides, and Takahashi used duels to represent that. He mentions how a pendulum swings all the way around to draw a circle. The strength of this hero does not come purely from the good, light, idealistic side, as many often portray, but it comes from both the light and the dark, both sides of the pendulum. It is a more realistic representation of a grounded, whole being. The light and the dark, both sides are needed to attain true strength, to become whole. And that is what he meant with the pendulum, swinging from side to side to eventually draw a circle. A quote by Carl Jung describes this well. "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." That is what we saw with Yugi and Yami Yugi. The bright boy harnessed the power of the darkness. He learned to control it, and both in turn became the king of games. The two sides would sway the pendulum back and forth, and in turn, create a circle, a complete being. This old Chinese proverb also describes this well. It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, further accentuating the duality we must all seek to become whole. The shadow or alter ego in Yugi's case shows us that no matter how weak you are, there's always a hidden inner strength deep inside you that you can harness, which leads to the next theme.